some point, Discworld peaked. Not with this book, mind you, or even the previous one. The peak wouldn't come for several more books at least. However, with The Last Continent, the Discworld series entered what I like to call the Silver Era. Books in this era tend to either fill me with a sense of, been there, done that, or be more concerned with quibblings over canon and world building than with actually telling stories. The Last Continent happens to do both of those things, which is probably why I mark it as the starting point of the Silver Era. So, what is The Last Continent? Oh no! It would appear that the Librarian, everyone's favorite orangutan, has come down with a flu! But since this is Unseen University, the Disc's premier school for wizardry, it happens to be a magical flu, which shapeshifts the Librarian every time he sneezes. The Unseen University staff could cure this flu, but only if they knew the Librarian's true name, which he patently refuses to divulge, as he fears the other wizards will use it to turn him back into a human. There's only one other person who knows the Librarian's true name, the cowardly wizard, 2 Z's, Rincewind. But where is he? Well, after the events of Interesting Times, Rincewind was whisked away to the mysterious continent of 4X, 4X's, where he is now desperately trying to live a peaceful and mundane existence. Unfortunately, the universe has other plans for him, if the talking kangaroo Scrappy is to be believed. According to him, Rincewind was brought to 4X at the behest of the creator god to bring about the wet, a mystical concept of water falling from the sky of all places. And Scrappy assures Rincewind that even someone as experienced in running away as him cannot run from destiny. Of course, clearly Destiny hasn't met Rincewind. How does the world of The Last Continent work? The Last Continent is similar to the first 2 Discworld novels in that its plot is mostly just Rincewind running around and finding out things about the Disc. And like those previous books, we do learn quite a bit about how things work in the Discworld. For instance, this book clearly establishes how, thanks to Great Attune constantly swimming through space, constellations in Discworld never stay in one place for too long. And The Last Continent also establishes Slood, a thing that all advanced civilizations inevitably discover. Of course, the book makes mention of some blue round world full of people far too ignorant to discover such a basic building block of life, but I'm sure any resemblance to a world we know is purely coincidental. This book also gives some clarity to the layout of Unseen University. While the concept of L-space, a nebulous void brought about by the presence of too many books, was first established in Guards Guards, The Last Continent shows how there are quite a few of these warped spaces throughout the university, the properties of which usually stem from the space's respective department. It's through their quest to find Rincewind that the UU staff wind up lost in one such space, a tropical island thousands of years in the past. And once there, the staff run into 2 divine beings. It turns out that the creator of the Disc, whom we met back in Eric, was not the only powerful entity knocking about back in prehistory. And while the Disc creator may have made the primordial soup from which all life sprang, as well as a cracker 7-pointed snowflake, thanks to the shenanigans of the UU staff, another god introduces sexual dimorphism and reproduction into the mix. Their mucking about also brings them into conflict with the creator of 4X, and it's here that most of the story's time is spent. While The Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic involved Rincewind running across most of the Disc, The Last Continent explores the one corner of that Disc that Pratchett had largely ignored, the continent of 4X. It is basically Australia, or at least a loving parody of the land down under. 4X is of course not down under itself, that would be silly, especially since the Discworld is quite flat. However, as with all Pratchett parodies, there are loving tributes to quintessentially Australian things, such as Mad Max, Ned Kelly, Priscilla Queen of the Desert, Men at Work, Vegemite, 4X Beer, Peach Melba, and even Bogans.
Because there's something about this land that just makes you think,
I don't give a shit about anything.
This actually illustrates something that I don't think Terry Pratchett gets enough credit for. When we talk about Sir Terry and his relation to myth, we usually focus on things like his portrayal of elves or dwarves, taking an old story and teasing out a logical conclusion that can be either frightening, thought-provoking, or just plain hilarious. But I don't think many people bring up how Pratchett's mixture of ancient legends and modern pop culture isn't actually that unique in the larger context of fantastic fiction. If anything, Discworld and its parodies are simply what the process of myth-making looks like within the confines of modern-day copyright law. Thanks to the efforts of the Walt Disney Corporation, modern authors can't really incorporate modern heroes like Mickey Mouse into their fantasy works unless they pay hefty royalties to the copyright holder. But myths are constantly being updated and retold with new modern heroes incorporated into their worlds. Most of the Knights of the Round Table were not created by Geoffrey of Monmouth, but rather by other authors centuries later. And we kept those characters around partly because they were compelling and we liked them, but also because we were legally able to do so. If I want to write a story about Sir Lancelot or Sir Parsifal, I'm more than capable of doing that since those characters are both in the public domain, but if I wanted to write a story about Shining Knight or Jason Blood, well, at best I could post that to AO3 or fanfiction.net, but I would never be able to properly publish such a work unless I got permission from DC Comics, because that corporation owns those characters, and will probably continue to do so for the rest of time. Parodies, then, were about the only way Pratchett could continue the noble tradition of myth-making, updating and retelling old tales as societies and times change, without getting into legal trouble. And honestly, I have to applaud him for this, because by doing this, he's provided a practical paradigm shift for us to keep the art of myth-making alive, as Disney slowly gobbles up all the intellectual property in the world. What does The Last Continent have to say? Not too much, honestly. It's not so much that the book has nothing to say, just that what it does have to say was said at greater length with greater detail in earlier books. The ideas on God and cosmology were explored more deeply in Small Gods and even Eric. The meditations on authority were a focal point of the City Watch books, and Death's Speech to Rincewind is really just a dilution of the larger ideas he explored in his own sub-series. It's with The Last Continent that Sir Terry feels like he said about all he has to say, and with nothing left really to say, he has decided to just have some fun. Which, after all he said in the last 21 books, I think Pratchett was rather entitled to do. But that illustrates why I call this part of the series the Silver Era. It's not that the stories are bad, it's just that they're no longer as innovative as their predecessors. Final verdict. Perhaps the best description of The Last Continent is that it's what the color of magic in the light fantastic would be if Pratchett had had 15 years of experience and skill to draw upon. The plot isn't that deep, and the themes are sparse, but the jokes and action are on a skill far above Pratchett's first forays onto the disc, for which the book gets a 7 out of 10. And perhaps the greatest sign of Pratchett's development, while The Last Continent may end similarly to The Light Fantastic, this time around, Rincewind gets to keep his happy ending. Pratchett, and the Discworld itself, no longer needed our cowardly wizard to keep readers interested, and so after this last adventure, Rincewind was allowed to finally retire. Of course, even without him, Discworld would continue for 19 more books, but that's a story for another day. For now, I'm Marc O'Keefe, signing off, and I hope you liked this video. If you did, and you would like to see me make more, please leave a like or comment down below, share my video via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or other means, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you would like to help this channel out, I have a Patreon, which you can contribute to via the link in the description. If you sign up, you will get sweet bonuses like an internet hug, early access to videos, and the ability to vote in polls to help me decide which works to cover next. Also, if I manage to get to 250 subscribers by the end of this year, that is 250 YouTube subscribers by January 1st, 2022, I will play and stream Dragon Quest V for you all. Let's do this, people! Come on, let's make this happen. Thank you all, and I will see you in the next one.